Welcome back to the 1% Insight. This week I'm delighted to be joined by Rosemary Wynne, Head of Marketing at EZO. EZO, formerly EasyGo, was founded in 2018 as Ireland's first private charge point operator with a clear mission to make electrical vehicle EV charging accessible, reliable and sustainable nationwide. EZO is building the EV network that drives tomorrow. Welcome to the 1% Insight, Rosemary.
Thanks for having me, Jack. Great to be here.
Brilliant. So I think this is going to be a fantastic conversation, especially as the EV kind of evolution has really taken, popularity and its necessity as well going into the next kind of decade in terms of hitting climate targets and all of that. So before we get into that conversation, to share a little bit about your career to date and how you got to EZO.
I started my career in an agency as a strategist, an above the line agency. I then moved and worked for another agency when businesses were first starting to go online. So that was really interesting, learning more about websites and online. From there, I moved to head up the corporate communications for a stock exchange. And during that time, I noticed it was the start of digital marketing and realized I needed to learn more about it. And so pivoted to move back to agency because I think agencies are great places to learn really quickly. You get involved in loads of different client work and it's a great learning ground. So worked in a digital agency for a good few years, learned all about SEO, PPC, digital strategies, and return on investment for marketing. And yeah, I guess my start with EasyGo and now EZO was kind of serendipitous. I was looking for a new role, and I wanted a brand that had purpose, and that was combining sort of purpose and tech. Yeah, the opportunity at EasyGo came along, and it really ticked both boxes. And it was a bit of an unexpected opportunity, but the more I looked into EV as a sector, I got really excited. The opportunity for growth, the fact that it was a new sector completely, the freedom to make your mark or to have an impact on that is really exciting from a marketing point of view.
We're at the very early stages, obviously, of the EV, especially charging. It's only, some places still don't even have charging ports, etc. In terms of like rural Ireland are still coming in. So it's really exciting to see how that kind of develops and how we all as consumers, start utilizing electric vehicles as they become more kind of attainable to the general public. In terms of, in your own words, how would you describe EZO? And obviously we can get into then maybe the rebrand. Obviously it must have been a busy year in terms of hitting the ground running from joining the company and then just recently doing the rebrand from EasyGo to EZO. So in your own words, how would you describe EZO?
EZO is electric vehicle charge point operator. We're building out the infrastructure that supports the charging of EV vehicles across Ireland and most recently into Scotland too.
You would have joined around a year ago, was it? You kind of had mentioned in terms of leading up the head of marketing at EasyGo and now EZO. How did you find the transition from your previous role to getting to this new sector? Was there a kind of a learning curve in terms of like the EVs, or was it just very much hit the ground running?
No, there was a huge learning curve. I think fair to say when I started here, I didn't own an EV. My knowledge about the EV sector was probably what most people's were for those who don't own EVs. So there was a huge learning curve for me. But it was incredibly interesting, and the challenge I think was evident in like you mentioned, Jack, that EasyGo started in 2018. They were one of the first companies in Ireland to start building out the EV infrastructure. They'd done a tremendously good job of doing that, and we needed the brand to reflect the market share that we had. And I think, coming into this space with kind of fresh eyes, looking at the market and understanding that the market itself was starting to mature to some point as the adoption of EV vehicles became more prominent. And we wanted a brand that really reflected that. So I guess the move from EasyGo to EZO was about creating a brand that reflected where we are today, but also reflected the growth that we intend to have. We wanted the brand to be more modern, a bit sharper, and more representative of our market share, and something that we could then easily take into new markets if required.
It's a fantastic work that was done on the brand. It's really striking when you look at it in terms of the color palette and even the typography of the logo and everything like that. Like, it really suits the EV kind of electrification technology type of brand that you'd expect. How difficult, because I guess it's rare that we get the opportunity to chat to someone who's just after doing a rebrand of a large company. How difficult is it, and maybe what are the stages that go into it in terms of doing and launching that rebrand?
I think it's good you ask me once it's done, because I think, hindsight is great. When you're in it, it's very chaotic. I think it was amazing. We have a great team here, and I had I suppose most importantly, I had the trust and support of my senior managers, who gave me the freedom to and believed in me to deliver it. There were challenges along the way, as you can imagine, but I think there's a real sense of purpose within the company to improve the services that we're offering, and a willingness from everyone in the team to support me in any way that they could, which is fantastic. Because I think, as you can imagine, rebrand isn't not just about the logo and the colors. It affects all areas of the business, through to from the way the building looks, through to the operations, through to the client contracts we have. So it touches everything. So it was a massive team effort, and yeah, I'm glad to have been able to play a part in it.
So, like I mentioned, this podcast is mainly focused on B2B tech marketing, B2B SaaS marketing. And I know that you serve both. You're in the fortunate position where you actually serve both B2B and B2C. So I think there'll be some really interesting insights in terms of how you kind of tailor those messages when you're speaking to maybe an enterprise or a business and their fleet versus maybe the consumer from an EV point of charging view, I guess, with their own vehicles. So how have you balanced that in terms of balancing of marketing messaging between B2B and B2C customers?
It is a constant battle, and balance. I think it's about remembering what's important to your audience. I think B2C, they want simplicity, they want quick, clear messaging, they want the convenience of getting to a charger and it working. They're looking for the ease of use, whereas the B2B clients, they are about the depth of what they want to understand. They want to know the technical specifications. They want to know the SLAs. So I think it's about making sure that you have content that caters to both of those audiences. I think in the EV market, there is generally an education piece that runs through both. So for the B2C, for the customers, it's about how to use the chargers, how to understand everything they need to know about owning an EV. I think with B2B, it's a relatively new sector. People investing or getting EV chargers on their property, they want to understand what are the long-term commitments of building infrastructure, and what does that look like, and what does that mean, and what do I need to know to ensure that I'm making the right decisions. So, anything that we could do to support the individual customers, B2B or B2C, at their various stages, we try to facilitate.
Yeah, and I guess trust is a big thing for you as well, serving both the B2B and B2C markets. I guess from a B2C point of view, they want to have the trust within the infrastructure that when they go to a certain place that there will be a charger as it says is, and with B2B, they obviously more technical and obviously more of the purchases in terms of longevity, etc. How have you balanced that through the content? Is there any kind of insights on how you kind of portray and build that trust with clients and customers digitally, I guess, when you're not meeting them in person the whole time?
Well, I think from a B2C perspective, we've tried to make the messaging on our chargers a lot clearer. We've created short videos, explainer videos on how to use the different chargers, because we have, different models of chargers. So we've tried to create content that is easily digestible, that customers can use when they're looking to charge their car. From a B2B perspective, it's obviously, we rely heavily on the case studies and the examples of the work that we have. I think typically, the B2B market, they're slightly risk averse. They like to be reassured through proof, not promise. And being able to have the content and have the case studies and have that to back up what we have done is definitely important in building trust and relationships.
Because even at that as well, at a more kind of national level, in terms of hitting emission targets, and obviously Ireland in the past hasn't probably been fantastic at doing that, this is a solution that could help them get there. So have you found that like there's good support from government backed initiatives or how is that going to play into, I guess, Ireland reaching climate targets and ensuring that we're being as sustainable as possible as a country?
There have been some great government initiatives in supporting the EV rollout. I know that they've done we were part of a tender process to put chargers into sports clubs across Ireland, which is being rolled out. And more recently, there's also been projects for the N roads, putting chargers along the various sites on the N roads. So those are both government initiatives that we are currently part of.
Have you seen any other countries that maybe acts as inspiration in terms of how they are rolling out EV or just being sustainable as a country?
The Nordics are always a point of inspiration as to how they roll things out, and certainly I think the likes of Denmark and Norway have certainly led the charge in terms of EV charging. So they are countries that we do look to try and emulate.
Be interesting now, because this obviously isn't more of a marketing thing, but even in the city centres like here in Cork, traffic congestion is quite bad. So it'd be interesting to see how EV can potentially, with the right infrastructure, provide that public transport element around the country. Is that in the roadmap for the electrification of vehicles?
It is on our radar. The heavy goods vehicles, it's not something I'm directly involved with at the moment, but I know from a business perspective, that certainly is on our radar.
Back to the marketing side of it, Rosemary, you have both the physical infrastructure in the EV charging points, but am I right in saying you have kind of software elements as well in terms of that you
Yeah.
provide to businesses and the consumers as well in terms of maps or the management of it? How does that look like for you in terms of the software stack that you have at ESO?
I think the biggest lesson is that the physical and the digital layers are really inseparable when it comes to delivering great customer experience. Product that spans both. So it's like you said, it's the charging infrastructure supported by the digital platform, and you very quickly learn that customers don't think in terms of hardware and software. They think of experiencing service as one thing. Any weakness in any of those layers is a weakness in the whole product. So I guess to create a trusted, reliable experience, the three elements need to work together. One is the physical infrastructure, which is the chargers. They must be working, they must be dependable, they must be easy to use. The digital infrastructure, so the app, the back end payments, payment flows, they need to be seamless, they need to be fast, and they need to be accurate. And then operations, from like technical support, maintenance, and communication, they must all align to really close the loop. Yeah, I think, stability, simplicity, and alignment across those three components is really what builds trust and drives adoption.
A key part that you mentioned is the education point of view. Is it more like behavioural change that are needed? Obviously, incentives for people to, purchase EVs and all that, in terms of that's coming from the government level. How have you found that balancing in terms of kind of educating the market on the benefits of EV and how they can do it effectively?
Anyone who first buys an EV, you're going through a whole new experience. You're buying a new piece of basically technology that you've got to then relearn how to use. We're so conditioned to stopping at a petrol station to fill up our cars. It does take a rethink in terms of recollaborating your brain in terms of how you're going to use this and where you're going to charge. There is, it's not new to talk about range anxiety for EV drivers. If you run out of battery, you run out of battery, and there's no reserve tank to get you to a petrol station, and no one can bring you a jerry can of petrol to fill up your car. So the risk of breaking or running out of battery creates fear and anxiety around range. And I think, customers, if you're at a point where your battery is low and you get to a charger and you don't know how to use it, or the charger's not working, that's a real fear factor for EV customers. So I think, anything that we can do to try and help reduce that anxiety and give them reassurance and the support that they need in order to be able to charge their car quickly and effectively is really what we're hoping to achieve. And I think, it's kind of a problem faced by all charge point operators that's generally should be our responsibility to help educate EV drivers about how to use their car effectively and how to use the network effectively. I think with all behavior behavioral change, there's a period of adaptation. And some people have been early adopters, and they love their EVs and they take to it like a duck to water. They've probably been doing it for 10 years. And then there's others who are only starting the EV journey, and it's about trying to meet people where they are in that journey and be able to provide them with the information that they need, the time that they need it, to give them some reassurance.
It's an interesting one in terms of how you balance that, because I suppose you're in a rare position of, something that is a more of a behavior than actually, getting that to people to adopt it, which is interesting from a marketing point of view, because it's rare. Usually if there's a software company, fintech, etc., it's very, they know how to do their bookkeeping. They just need to improve it. Whereas this is more of a behavioral aspect to it in terms of changing the way we think and how we operate as a kind of a global and national level. So that's an interesting one from a marketing point of view.
It is that behavioral shift that people have to get used to, and then we all have to get used to. And I guess as the network grows, those opportunities, it will become more integrated into our lives, and it won't become a destination for necessarily charging, but more integrated into how we live.
With the B2C side of it, often, and I think it's getting better now, because in B2B marketing, you're seeing more B2B companies, B2B technology companies push the boundaries on, what creativity looks like in B2B. And I definitely think that's coming to a new level, which is really exciting. But I think B2C is probably always that slightly bit ahead in terms of how they're adapting to trends and marketing to consumers. Has there been any insights from B2C over your career as well, not just at EZO, that you have found has started to influence into B2B, or what could B2B marketers learn from a B2C kind of campaign, or the creativity around B2C? How could they bring that into their B2B marketing?
The difference is not what it used to be. B2B brands have come a long way in terms of being a bit more creative. There used to be a time when it was only white papers and very specific content that B2B companies used. And I think more and more we see the use of video coming into B2B marketing, which perhaps you wouldn't have seen before. I think maybe it's a generational thing. I think the people who are now the decision makers are probably digital natives. They've grown up with an element of digital and online presence. So the integration for them is or the separation for them is less severe. So I think you can even see that on LinkedIn as a platform in terms of the types of content that's been put on there compared to what it was, even 5-10 years ago. I think AI will play a huge role for B2B going forward. I think there's a huge opportunity for B2B to use that effectively. I think improve the ease of doing business. And I think in terms of creativity, the B2C side is interesting because, longer form content is now becoming more prevalent in B2C, which was always more traditionally more B2B. So it'll be interesting to see how B2B users can use that same element or elements of that to convey their value proposition and their story more effectively.
It wouldn't be a conversation on marketing 2025 if we didn't mention AI. I feel like it's in, every conference and every discussion, which it should be, as well as we kind of understand or improve our understanding of how it's going to impact our careers, our workflows. How do you see AI benefiting maybe B2B tech marketers, selling, hardware, software?
Yeah, like I said, it is about simplifying the customer journey, and creating a personalized experience. So I think we're at an interesting time with AI. There seems to be a flurry of new innovative AI tools that you can use to simplify your operations, to be creative, to drive efficiencies. And I think, back to my point about the ease of doing business, I think from a B2B point of view, being able to find a partner or a supplier that you can work with seamlessly, who understands your problems, the nuances of whatever your problems are, and being able to tailor that more specifically. And I think AI gives B2B the opportunity to do that. So I think it'll be a really interesting space. I think it's also a great leveler in terms of a lot like what digital marketing was for small businesses. I think AI does the same in terms of, making video rich content more accessible to the smaller B2B brands that maybe wouldn't have had the opportunity to do large scale video production. So I think, I'm optimistic. I think it'll be interesting to see what transpires over the next 12 to 18 months.
Because 100%, it's inevitable really. You can either, what is the saying, that AI won't take your job, but someone who can use AI will take your job. So I think
Yeah.
there's a lot of not scaremongering. I think that's probably too strong of a word, but I think there's a lot of fear around it because it's new. But just like when the internet came or social media came, it obviously disrupts the industry that was there before in terms of traditional media to, digital media. And now it's going to a next evolution in terms of how you use this to assist your marketing, probably smaller teams maybe that can get more done, which, that's to be seen how that kind of implements from that point of view.
In some ways, it's not dissimilar to EV driving.
Coming at the kind of the same time in terms of adoption, and maybe AI is moving faster because we can obviously access at our fingertips. But it is interesting to see maybe the parallels between two new technologies entering the market and changing how live and work, etc. With B2B, obviously, and you have it as well, like the infrastructure, all the back end of the software that you have is highly technical, complex. Any bits of advice for B2B marketers who might have a technical product that is complex and a lot of features? And how would you streamline your messaging maybe to make it simpler?
I think sometimes, we're so busy telling people about what it is we do, and we forget to tell them what we can do for them. I love the analogy, I can't remember who said it, is like, you don't sell a drill, you sell a hole. And that concept is true for technical marketing and sustainability. You talk about it and frame it in the context in terms of the solution that you're offering. I think using language that is accessible, and that people understand, is a great equalizer, and gets people on board a lot quicker. So I think the more human, the more relevant you can make your communication, the more likely it is they'll be able to understand it in the context of how it applies to them. And I think that's really what marketers are looking to try and do.
Definitely, no, it's a fantastic insight. Before we get to sharing your kind of 1% insight to leave our listeners with, we have a kind of a rapid fire round where we ask in terms of 3 short questions. And the first one is the best book. Now, I'm changing this question. Actually, I'm going to start in this podcast. So it can either be a book, but it can also be a podcast or a newsletter, because obviously digital marketing changes so much, B2B marketing changes so much. But what is the best book for marketers?
I'm probably going to go a little bit left field here. I'm a big fan of Malcolm Gladwell. So for me, I think it would be The Tipping Point. I'm fascinated by the way he looks at human behavior, culture, and the book is really about how ideas and behaviors and products spread.
The second question is a company, not ESO, doing great, maybe tech marketing or marketing that you admire.
MailChimp. I've seen their ads on LinkedIn recently. I like the use of humor. If you're in marketing, you've probably at some point in your life used MailChimp, which is, I suppose, relevant to me. That's maybe why it stood out. And then also like Slack, I think, Slack have been tremendous in terms of how they've integrated themselves as becoming part of the office banter. And I think they've done that really cleverly. And I think anyone who's used Slack will probably be a Slack ambassador for the next place they go to. So yeah, from a business point of view, that's really what you need.
Yeah, no, Slack is a great platform and streamlines the communication. So they've really taken huge market share in that kind of communication space. And the last one under rapid fire, Rosemary, is if you weren't in marketing, what would you be doing?
I think something around like, trends or behavior. So like a behavioral economist, if I was smart enough to be an economist, that's probably what I'd be interested in doing.
Cool. Very good. And then finally, what is your 1% insight that you'd like to leave our listeners with, whether it be in B2B tech marketing, B2B marketing, or just overall marketing?
It's nothing new to say. I think the moment you think you've figured it out, you've fallen behind. So it's to stay curious, to listen, to be open to having your opinions or mind changed. And I think to be humble. I think it keeps you grounded, and I think curiosity keeps you moving forward. So probably those two, being humble and curious.
Fantastic, Rosemary. Thank you for sharing your 1% insights today. Where can our listeners find you online and also learn a bit more about ESO?
Well, you can find us on ezo.ie or ezo.co.uk. We're also on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram. And I'm on LinkedIn, Rosemary Wynne.
Thank you, Rosemary.
Thank you, Jack. It's been most enjoyable.